Far to the west of America, nestled among vast wheat fields, lay a small village. Simple wooden houses stood close together, with kitchen smoke rising into the sunset, painting a scene of serenity. The villagers lived off the land, farming and raising livestock. They were accustomed to the sun, the wind, and the occasional rain, but they paid little attention to what the future might bring. Only one man was different: Thomas, a middle-aged farmer with calloused hands and eyes filled with deep contemplation. He was no richer than his neighbors, yet his farm always stood firm and his crops always thrived. Thomas did not rely on luck. He believed that careful preparation was the only way to survive. That summer was hotter than usual. The winds carried the dry scent of scorched grass, rattling the rooftops as they passed. One morning, Thomas looked up at the sky. The fluffy white clouds were slowly giving way to faint gray patches. He paused from his plowing, wiped the sweat from his brow, and nodded to himself. "A storm is coming," he murmured. Without hesitation, he got to work. He checked every plank on his roof, hammering in long nails to secure them. He reinforced the barns, stacked sandbags around the foundation, and led his livestock to safe shelter. He stocked up on food and water, enough to last for days. His neighbors watched and laughed. "The sky is still clear, yet Thomas is working so hard." "You worry too much. There hasn't been a big storm in years." "That old man lives in fear." Thomas did not respond. He simply continued his work. To him, preparation was never in vain. 3 days later, the sky suddenly changed. The once warm winds turned cold and fierce, making the golden wheat fields sway like restless waves. The sky darkened into an eerie shade of grayish purple. Black storm clouds piled up, towering like mountains. The air grew heavy, pressing upon the villagers like an invisible weight. Flocks of blackbirds fled from the rooftops, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Now the villagers grew uneasy. They rushed to shut their windows and herd their animals inside. But for many it was too late. Their barns were weak, their roofs unfortified. Thomas stood on his porch, gazing at the horizon. Lightning flickered in the distance, a warning of the approaching storm. He took a deep breath, then stepped inside and locked the door. That night the storm arrived in full force. Thunder rumbled like the roar of cannons, and lightning slashed through the pitch-black sky. The wind howled like a raging beast, slamming against rooftops and shaking the old wooden beams. Doors that weren't properly secured burst open. Weak roofs were ripped from houses, vanishing into the darkness. Trees toppled, and frightened cattle ran wildly across the fields. The villagers screamed, desperately holding on to anything they could. But the torrential rain poured down like an unrelenting flood, tearing apart flimsy thatched roofs and breaking down fragile fences. Meanwhile, Thomas's farm stood strong. He sat by the fireplace with his wife and child, listening to the storm rage outside without a trace of fear. He knew he had done everything in his power to protect his family. When the sun rose the next morning, the village lay in ruins. Collapsed houses, fallen trees, and pools of rainwater covered the land. The fields were drowned, the crops flattened. Many barns were destroyed, and livestock had gone missing. The villagers stepped outside in silence, staring in the devastation. Then their eyes turned to Thomas's farm. It stood unscathed. His roof was intact, his fences untouched, and his livestock safe. Only now did the villagers truly understand. One man stepped forward, his voice filled with regret. "You were right, Thomas. We should have listened to you." Thomas smiled, his gaze kind yet firm. He patted the man's shoulder and said, "It's never too late to learn the value of preparation. Today, we can rebuild. But next time, don't wait until the storm arrives to fix your roof." Morale of the story: This story teaches us that in life, we should not wait for difficulties to come before we start preparing. Success does not belong to the strongest, but to those who can foresee the future and plan for the challenges ahead. Fix the roof while the sun is still shining.